say that Cynthia Roseberry, who was the executive director of Clemency Project 2014, I just want to congratulate her. She's the new executive director of the Council for Court Excellence. So I just wanted to make that an announcement. She's usually a regular here. I want to turn to state issues. Nicole Porter.
Thank you, Nikichi. So the State Issues Working Group is a working group of national organizations that have state priorities. And so far this year, we have met in working group to grapple with around political education given the changing times within the states. In that working group, we've done work to monitor and collaborate on state reforms, including state activity in Nebraska, New Jersey, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and South Dakota. We share information, intelligence, and check in with other groups doing similar work and offer opportunity for collaboration. So just some quick highlights. In Nebraska this year, there's actually a reform to expand the franchise to people with felony convictions. That state has a 2-year waiting ban after the completion of a sentence. And that legislation actually made its way to the governor's desk, although it failed the legislature failed to override the governor's veto. That said, there is a strong coalition. It was the first time that the legislation was introduced, and it was an example of even in the middle of the country, even in Trump country, these reforms happen. New Jersey has current legislation on Christie's desk that would authorize racial impact statements. Those statements are similar to fiscal or environmental impact statements, but looking at racial disparity for proposed sentencing law. In that state also, there has been a robust coalition that's include a range of stakeholders from the faith community to also the civil rights community. So over the last couple of months since the last Justice Roundtable meeting, the working group has workshopped a range of issues that move state reform. In one meeting, we discussed incarceration alternatives for parents who are currently incarcerated who had custody of their children prior to incarceration. And there is ongoing activity in Washington State and Massachusetts this year. And we heard from colleagues at the Justice Strategies who gave us a highlight on that. On the last meeting, we did feature a conversation about jails. So we had colleagues from the Vera Institute for Justice, and we hosted people from DC community who are working on the new jail conversation that is starting to take place in the district. And we also had a brief conversation about the Close Rikers campaign and how that ongoing activity. Close Rikers campaign is an effort in New York City where advocates are working to close the Rikers jail and have a new plan for reimagining the jail system in New York. So we had a robust conversation in the last working group meeting, and it was an opportunity for folks at Vera to engage directly with advocates in the DC area, share information, and share resources and materials, and including they gave a brief update on the report that's been released this week and the briefing later in the week. And we want to continue to have these conversations in the state issues working group meeting. And the next conversation we want to have is look at relief for people with violent offenses in the state level and actually look at reforms that have been adopted. And so our colleagues from the Campaign for Fair Sentencing of Youth, I think, already stepped out. But we want to look at the activity around eliminating juvenile life without parole as a sentencing option within states, scaling that back, and looking at other parole reforms as well. In Washington State this year, legislation was introduced to authorize post-incarceration review for people at 20 who've served at least 20 years in prison, regardless of their underlying offense. So that would impact people sentenced to life in prison and other long-term sentences. We are now meeting the first Wednesday of every month. So the next meeting would be scheduled for July 5th. Although we may reschedule given that that is the week of July 4th. So at the very least, the first Wednesday of every month, unless otherwise notified, and we will send that notice out over the State Issues Working Group listserv. So I invite you to get in contact with me about the working group, or Monica Reed from NACDL, who's here. Monica, please raise your hand. She's also a point of contact, and we encourage you to reach out to us if you have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you if anyone wants to say anything more specific about the DC jail situation.
Be
This
more
is an
specific about it if you have.
announcement. Just
So, yes, okay. So very brief, there has been ongoing conversation around DC building a new jail. There are demands and interests because the current facility is 40 years old, and there's pressure coming from all sides to have a newer, more modern facility. The DC jail population is down significantly, and so there is extra space in the jail. And actually, earlier this year, there are two facilities that comprise the DC jail system. One of which was CTF. I always forget what CTF stands for. Okay, so that was owned by DC but managed by private company CCA. And because of a lot of different factors, including support from organizational stakeholders with advocacy groups, the DC government ended the private prison contract and transferred control of that part of the jail back to DC government. That has led to an ongoing conversation, contributed to an ongoing conversation about what to do with the space to detain people in the jail system, including this conversation that's been going on for several years now around building a new facility.
so, can we just say that there's a group that's looking at those issues? So just
Sure,
so
we can say that.
we just,
We can
yeah,
say
okay.